And so here we are in this new consciousness. 2021, excuse me, is a whole different world, a whole different place for a whole lot of people who may not quite understand the complexity of this newfound ability to receive a lot of information about a lot of things we want to understand this happened in their past. We're all about our history, but we're still in this new age of awakening on so many levels for so many different people, plus or minus depending on how the story made sense or even mattered. Kind of like Black Lives. And here we stand on the 18th day of Black History Month. And we're talking again about the complexities of things that really affected a lot of the new millennialized people. And what I mean by this is that, we all are aware of the baby boomers. Then we got the late boomers. Then we got the X's. Then we got the Y's and the Z's. And they kind of melt together because right around the Y's and the Z's of the late 70s and early 80s, we entered another era of reality. We went from analog to digital. A lot of people lost the ability to know the richness in film when you went to a theater that had a great big screen where the colors in the film actually flowed on the people all around, and part of that feeling of theater came in a much richer sound. And no matter how big you can get your TVs or whatnot now, nothing can compare to that big 70 millimeter or whatever it was, big thing in a room that held a couple thousand people almost, sound, knowing true left and true right, no matter how it's recorded, depending on your system or its availabilities. Most people only had a mono mindset in music. They didn't hear the lefts and the rights and the pans till digital came back. And the best way to put that was when you knew you had a stereo unit, because you could hear Janet Jackson's "Give Me a Beat" and it would tap 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 tap, and you could hear the lefts and the rights a little bit. But if you really didn't know, it really didn't matter much. It was still a good record. What does that have to do with the civil rights movement and Fred Hamilton and the Judas and the Messiah and the Black Panther Party and and feminism and welfare system and Lyndon B. Johnson and Black love and the movement when it was rainbow? It was all power to all the people. And yet a lot of what's clouding the ability for the masses to get this is that we can't really talk on a major basis out like Twitter and stuff like that, because people don't understand. Each person is coming from a perspective that was very unique in its creation. The civil rights movement felt different for somebody in Alabama as it did for somebody in Maine, or somebody in Philly, or somebody with a radio, somebody who had the ability to read. These were things that when it happened, people may not have. When we had our Jetson or Ebony magazines, it was some ways the only time during that time era when all these things were going on, the best that we would understand is little news clips of something that happened in our Black communities somewhere around the country. And depending on how somebody decided that they wanted to portray how people should see it, kind of in that mindset of there's three sides to every story. There's their story and there's his story, and then there's the truth. Well, the truth, you can't handle the truth right now. As people of color on this planet and everybody else around who's been miseducated as to how these things came out. I watched a documentary about people in the suburbs of the country, not just in the cities where things were happening, but down the street, way down the street, way down the street, or way across the country, where those things didn't mean a hill of beans. And yet we all lived during that era. The only things we had in common were the national things that we were all exposed to in real time. Oh, they shot Kennedy. Oh, look at the airplane go up. Oh, they're rioting over there. Oh, poor so-and-so died. Why are we worried about this? Oh, so-and-so. These things like that. These were the minuscule things that people in America were created, consisted, constructed, molded, and educated to the point where we're far beyond now. Many of our cultures and many of our areas that have known to have been very racist in nature now, finding themselves more discomforted by the ability for them to have a good couple of friends of races and whatnot. You can't stand. My family can't stand this, that, and other, but these guys are good guys. And it's happening so much now that this struggle that we're still having here in the United States of America, and nowhere else, is really boils down to this subject of this movie and its script and the screenwrite of and the message into which it's been causing many of the people on these new trending areas to really get in. And boy, oh boy, I've watched a lot of these things. Oh my God. I don't even want to get into Twitter because there's Black Twitter, and Black Twitter is no joke. It's the real thing, baby, for a lot of, people out there that are in the know, because these are also people that are going to grow into our next leaders and whatnot too. But I want to get into this little subject because part of the reason why it's incapable for us to explain the intensity, the richness of what was really going on our block during the mid 60s to the mid 70s was due to the mere fact that while we could remember everything else, the reality and the shift in our culture smacked everybody. They basically beat all of the protest and everything else out of every American on this dirt during this same era when all of a sudden crack killed Applejack. And it kept on going. And for all the people who thought that they missed it are now on, it's like a continuous thing. And we've lost that crack era, thank God. But it's still in the rural areas, still going because and so when those kind of people who have those kind of problems try to think about these people and their problems and how it must have felt to be a part of this, that, and the other, it's kind of hard for you to hear things described in such a short, unsweet kind of manner of usage of the language into which you're trying to interpret from their words of trying to describe colors. And during that era of that nightmare walking, psychopath talking kind of reality that infected and changed the genetic value of people that they're the fruit of our loins, but they're a whole different thing. You can't see it. I can sit back and say, man, I can remember the richness of the funk amongst us. I can remember when it wasn't just one person who had their own particular smell, but it was so rich in all of that because the best deodorant we had was Badussi or Tussin or whatever it was. And, and black was beautiful, but black was really organic. Our lives were organic. While there were militants, there were still very, very conservative people of color who existed in these areas while we believed that each and every one of these people were just black. Now we know that there are many different textures of blackness, and so that gives some kind of way towards the discomfort or the reason for being more conservative due to the mere fact that there were people that were from other countries and cultures and things of that nature. They secretly had accents that while they similarly was with this one or that one or this, that, and the other, in the process of all of that, this civil rights movement, this power to the people thing, it wasn't about how they were fighting for all of y'all and the blackness and the right to this, that, and the other. It was the fact that they were fighting for a massive amount of control over the communities that revolved around them in all of what they were. And at a certain time, people get lost in the descriptions of this because they, only want to see the militant part. They don't want to see the pimp part. They don't want to see the church part. They don't want to see the down low part. They don't want to see the racism part. They don't want to see so many different textures of things that back in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s were just organically what it was, to the point where even if it didn't sound right, just like a half of the stories or 2/3 of the stories in the Bible, no matter how bad it seemed that they did something to this, that, and the other, the bottom line of the same story was the same thing as the story of Jesus. No matter how that's really a really intense kind of story of a really good brother that really meant a lot for a whole lot of people that ended up having to die for the sins of them just not getting it because it really wasn't that serious to them on a day-to-day basis, because it was, and that's how they could have voted for Jesus to be saved instead of the thief dude, but the thief dude was their boy. I was listening to a lot of the different things, and I found it kind of interesting when we can get people to, first off, stop trying to call people Uncle Toms, because that would totally disclude them from the conversation that we're having from this point on, just due to the mere fact that you have no idea on Black History Month, still today in 2021, the history of not just the character Uncle Tom, but the person and the autobiography, because both of them were commendable brothers in our genetics enough to understand how the only thing that your use of the Uncle Tom and the derogatory thing shows is that you're still instinctually dysfunctional by way of a bamboozlement that genetically created your ability to really think that Uncle Tom is a bad thing. Technically speaking, in the book, it was a Sambo, but I digress, because these things are just like the Judas and the Messiah. And while we were down for the Fred Hamiltons and this, that, and the other, technically speaking, and everything in our lives, there are more of what we call the Judas, because it's not just about your life. Even if you have the best intentions for everybody, it's still not about you. You can want to die right now for everybody's freedom. And there'll be more people that need to wake up in the morning and need to go take care of these kids. And they can just, I understand what you're saying. You go ahead and die for your freedom. And that's between you and God and your Lord or whatever you got. But here we are. And it's 2021. And there's way too many things going on. We're sitting back here and we dealing with, the mere fact that the only theater that really is entertaining us past this debacle of government that's been going on for the past 3 months is now this movie and this subject. And it's a good subject, especially in this month, if we can stop miseducating ourselves and each other by being incapable of accepting the fact that there is no victimization in how we got here unless we do something better with what we got here. And for that reason, there are a lot of people who believe that the things that they did for the reasons that other people might have found them workable to be the Judas for me. And that same kind of mentality, think about the theatrical message of how this is where we at. Hey, snitches get stitches. But we got to say something. They killing our neighbors. They killing this, that, other. If you say something, but now we're still in, if you see something, say something, but don't be a snitch. And those things aren't very good, and those odds aren't very great in our favor no more in this world that we got, because we got no ability to be able to see how simple, organic it was back in that era, to the point where the thing here is not the Frank Hamiltons, but it's the Judases. Even though these Judases were people who shot Malcolm and Martin and did all these other little things and sold out and blah, 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 this, that, and the other, it could have been much worse had we not understood that if we're still here today, part of what we need to do as people of color and other people who are affected emotionally by the discomfort of this whole subject need to release ourselves from the stigma, the energy, the trigger that these words and these things are. The first is never be ashamed to being ignorant on any subject you think you've mastered enough to not be stupid and prevent yourself from a blessing of enlightenment. You never got to where you're at right now because you wanted to be this smart when you were a kid. Let's get that straight. And this Judas and the great Messiah Fred, Black Panther Party, and this, that, and the other, you can't understand that while these things were beautiful, baby, right where they were on their block in their neighborhoods, and it looked just like power to the people, like you like these things and you're now pro-Black freedom. It wasn't like that back in that just a few years ago. Back in the 70s and the 80s, these were distinctive cultures of things that worked because these people related to each other culturally, but they didn't look like you think everything looked. It took all of us, but there was a thing that was going on with all of us but there was still a respect for the certain casual culture that existed in a lot of these areas. So not that they didn't want the Negroes to be free down south, but they didn't want them to get a little too overly free for no damn reason, because we can't do that in our own little things. But that was a little too deep for people to understand now, to understand how much or how little we actually possess in the ownership of these areas that we feel so passionate about, our neglect as Americans. And, you know, the awkwardness of this whole Judas subject is the mere fact that in order for you to lose that stigma and still win any debate after this state, consider this. Thurgood Marshall. There's lots of other prominent people who have all been an informant to some degree or another, rather they liked it or not. Just for the mere fact that an informant didn't mean that they were snitches. An informant means that they were identifiable by the government that governed us, and everything that we did, whether we liked it or not, it still got all of us who are left here today, even though they didn't have the best intentions of all of us today, having more of a fair share of it today than the history of this country from the time that it was first created. And for that reason, here on the 18th day of Black History Month, I want you to really step back from your instincts of that and understand that it took all of us being the best at what we were, even if you didn't think it was the best of anything. Oh my God, Rodney King was not the best person to take a butt whooping, but he took a butt whooping real good. What we wanted was the fair treatment that we're demanding for, and we're still going to get it. Everything is going to be okay as long as people stop shutting up, but start opening up to a more fair reality. Part of that comes with their sexuality. You know, people sit back around and they want to say, yeah, you know, you're supposed to be this, that, and the other, so on and so on, until all of a sudden you start talking about how everybody loved themselves some Coretta. And they was always trying to get at her because they knew that Martin was a dog. He was a dog. He was a good dog. And yet Coretta stayed on her, stand by her man, you weak something, this, that, and the other. You know, I'm more pissed off about the fact that my husband got a bunch of doggone boys with him, got their doggone nose trying to get up my tail, and you can't handle this. And that's something that today would have been on TikTok, and yet we can't rock with the history of where we're at because of something called crack. Because crack lost us the ability to actually see us logically at any given time, to give any ability to have any kind of serenity, any kind of ability to actually see through someone else's eyes, because instinctively there were so many other things that was caused by that error. As so many other things changed, that they can't see how sweet Carnation instant milk tasted right out the box. They can't see how they don't remember how many times that, you know, we didn't take frequent showers because we didn't have frequent water. We visit family in the country and have to learn how to go out to the outhouse, while people in the hills and people over there and stuff like that, while it might have looked like this, we all didn't have running water and toilet paper like that back in those days. Even when you travel abroad, you'll find that most of the people in the world don't have it like that. And therefore you take your little rag, or you figure out how to use your hand, and you keep on stepping. And it don't matter how high or low you are in that thing, when you out in a place that's got no facilities, it is what it is. And yet when we reach back into our own little, but this is our story. In a lot of cases, just due to the unconscious instinct for us to lose the ability to see the logic due to the emotional, traumatic state. This is what Dr. Joyce DeGruy spoke about in her book about post-traumatic slave syndrome, in the same way that it mirrored the whole case that the Jews convinced the whole world existed in their genetics to this day as well. And yet you can't let a lot of us utilize that to that level yet, because a lot of us are not aware how many distinctive genetic, cultural, complicated, conflictual instincts that exist just between the people that see us as just black. They see, Fred from here. Where's his wife from? How did that change the culture of people who, before their love affair and their childbearing, a now mixed cultural child, they came from cultures and areas where they didn't mix with each other. Now we're living in a world where this is getting so deep now that you just think that you're talking to somebody that's one race, and we're such a multicultural kind of thing in there that, part of the problem that we got is just the inability to see these things in more of a understandably regional or situational perspective. It's kind of like, hey, yo, man, how you be? Yeah, finally you come in here. About damn time. And let me turn back up my whatchamacallit. Y'all hold right on. All right, that's better. All right, how you doing, B? You want to get in this? You want to get in this? Let's see. Yeah. All right, I'm back. So, I got my cuz on here. I don't know if you can hear him or not. I'm not turning on my mic a whole lot more than that. You can see where I'm at. You can see what I'm working with over here. It's not really much of anything, but yeah, now that I got company, I can probably at least keep my head halfway close to where I'm going with this. So what I'm saying here is, all right, what I've been saying here is that, as I've been watching all of this Judas and Black Messiah and all these other black things and black history and all this other shit, so-called trending from all of these people from millennials. You could tell the millennials, but what I can really tell is the mere fact that most of these people today, to be born in the late 70s is not an insult. Today, being born in the early 80s is not an insult. But if you were born in the early 80s on, there is a very distinct genetic kind of stigma that seems to happen, where it's kind of like trying to describe, the images in the Bible by using the fewest words as possible. And therefore they just get right. And so they just get it was the burning bush. They don't get how dude was walking up a dark mountain up through rocks and stuff like that, and he saw a glow. He saw a glow that came from, with sandals, and he was walking up there, and he finally got over there. It was a burning bush. They didn't say what kind of bush it was, only as a dark joke. Only Mel Brooks, wink, wink, could have gotten away with making that bush weed. Hey, man. Now come back and tell that story with those tablets and see how the story changed when they walk back down. And he's like, hey, what's happening? And they going, what's up with you, man? I found a burning bush and I'm high. I'm so high, baby. I seen God. He told me to take these damn tablets and tell y'all fucking up, Jack. You know what I'm saying? This is Judas and the Messiah that day. This is the same era where when all of that was happening down the street, there was a scene of Cornbread Earl and me right up the street. And the story was just as rich enough to be just as long and just as vast and just as bright and just as dramatic. And how, man, those pigs shot Cornbread. He was just going to get an orange pop. And yet, Mr. Fred didn't want to stick. And yet, there were people who tried to testify that they didn't see nothing. And today, that would have been another version of Judas and Cornbread. You see what I'm saying? No, I'm going to say that because, we got to live here. And instead of Mr. Charlie and them been good to us. So I'm just going to take the fifth. And understand that in a lot of cases, the Judas that they spoke of was not just the Judas that people saw in the movie, the one that everybody's, really upset about, because that Judas, unlike every other kind of Judas that was spoken in this movie, what I found so intense about the story, that the message was the mere fact that it was saying, at the end of everything else, when most people got up and said, yo, man, it's a dope movie. Then all of a sudden it shows you the interview of him, when he finally decides to tell the story to the letter as they wrote it that you just saw, and then said, how are people going to think about this movie when they see it years from now? And the And no, and it got nothing to do with what it started. It's got to do with the way it ended. Because here's your shout. Here's your shout. Your shout is because not too long after that clip was recorded and he knew, he went home still in the 70s, still after, he saw this community go from black power to white powder. You see what I'm saying? And it start going and understand that he killed himself before he saw crack. Yeah. Because he was thinking, I wish that I could go back to the day before he decided to kill himself and ask him how he felt. I wish that I could go back and find this Judas dude, just like Jesus felt that he could go back and find Judas and say, dude, it's not your fault. If I'd have known it was like that, we could have played this whole game against them even better. And that's been, and that's it's not even a turnabout thing, because you have to understand the logic of the people back in that era. You understand what I'm saying? Back in that era, we still drank a little spoiled milk. It didn't have to be all the way spoiled, but there was rather a little spoiled or no milk at all. Do you understand what I'm saying? We was back in that era where people that's the way they sold it. You didn't get things, we didn't have deodorant. We didn't have condoms. We still had people, mothers, no. We're the late in baby boomer types. I'm talking about those people We hung out with them because we were their size and their excuse for them to get out. But they went out there because they were of the age that they went out and got extra high. And we had times that we would drag them back home and save them from getting busted. We were those kids of that. And that's the only reason why we can remember that back in that era, right then when Fred, and the Panthers and all of this were hot and heavy. Because what you see as these organizations to us were our uncles and our fathers and our cousins and our family that were supporting a movement, supporting a reason to stand up and do something right here, right now for these people right here, right now. Yes, I love everybody else, but these people right here, right now need that. And understand during that era, it mirrors the same thing that we're going with now in the whole Texas area, especially the Houston image, where, we got power in Houston for downtown, but all the surrounding areas were black, like a donut. And the mere fact that these are the same people, but these are the same people that run off every dog on my birthday weekend, June 16th, 17th, 18th, screaming Juneteenth when it was 2.5 years later. Instead of screaming, look, y'all ain't gonna pull this Juneteenth, because that's what that image looked like to me. They kept that little money and didn't even tell them that they got paid off for y'all being free for 2.5 more years. Feel what I'm saying? And yet they still want to talk about how proud they, and the thing is it's so hardwired that if they can just keep y'all inside long enough to succeed, they could make their own universe. And there are people out there that believe that when you believe that your vote is counting in Texas. Because they ain't never really honestly cared that much about them, like they didn't care enough for Fred, but they cared for Fred just enough to make sure that he didn't fight back.
Did you notice in the movie, the Judas guy, as he got deeper and deeper and kept getting paid, his wardrobe
got better.
Right?
Now, therein lies.
We got to show our wealth on our backs.
That now, and not only that, but in a manner where he was sharper when he went to go get more money, but he was still sharper when he came back, but not that sharp. You know what I'm saying?
Right. He wasn't no smarter.
So
he had more stuff, but he wasn't no smarter.
Well, no, I'm saying that, even though he was coming up, people didn't think that he was that flashy. He was all black militant clothes, had the thing down with the basic, down for the cause, thing, only with a nice cooler flare now. Now he's going to Wright Brothers. He's getting the bubble top shoe thing. You know what I'm saying? But he don't make it flashy. Now he go to the white folks, he down in that sucker down, Hager double neck, with the flap and the beltless jaunt and, the things, with the no pockets in the front kind of thing, and so when he came in the last time he came in, he had the leather coat and the whole nine. He was at Superfly mode. And what people didn't understand is that, realizing that this dude was in a whole different culture and life as things were growing around them. And even though these people were all together in the struggle, they didn't live in the same spot. They didn't do the same. Man, they still, had things going around them. They didn't, some of the people wanted to stop the prostitution and stop the drugs and stop the this, that, and the other. And the cable, and he's like, no, can't you see? This fight is bigger. We need those people to this, that, and the other. And people couldn't morally understand that because most people of color were still conditioned into that kind of conservative morality. That even if it was happening, they were respected. They were respected for not doing as I do as I say. and respecting that. That was the last era that respected that. Once crack came into effect, we inherited the all hell no instinct at a very young age to know all hell no, mama. You know, you ain't selling me. You know, I'd rather be locked up than this. You know, and we've got people that those people are grandmothers and great grandmothers and great great grandmothers now, because now we've got adults that can't remember how to party like it's 1999 because that's around the time that they were born, and they got kids, and that's where we are today. And that's where we, but feel what I'm saying though, but that's where we are today as we're sitting here right now, you know, talking about this movie that was very well done outside of the person who was on the Shakers. They was just an actor. They wasn't a drummer. Ooh, that still gets me to this day. I'm sorry. That scene. Yeah. That's me. You know, yeah. You know what I'm saying? Now see, and you know, this is the deep thing about this whole thing, man, because you know, for a lot of people, they didn't realize how there were very few of us to travel, but there was a lot of us who traveled. That Green Book thing was real, you know, and you didn't need a Green Book if you knew the right kind of people. And we didn't have a Rolodex that we rolled out with in the whole nine, but somehow we found a way of, hey, do you know so-and-so? I know where they at. I got this, that, and other, you know, and we had an instinct that no longer exists. We got people now running off of cliffs because their GPS said so. You know, these are not the same kind of people. In order for you to explain to them an era that existed in such a way, you know what I'm saying, that they can't even imagine enough to see that there was no bad in what got us to a good thing. It just was a lot of things that you thought were bad being more of the reason why we got where we're at than not. You know, that's like a lot more people could have died on the Jim Jones thing if there wasn't enough people to say we ain't messing with them people down there. You know, but we ain't stopping them neither. And
check this out.
You know, yeah, go ahead.
When you're going back into the 70s,
yeah,
you got to remember that heroin was big in the 70s. But then when disco started kicking in, folks didn't want to die no more. They wanted to be live.
But
that's when they came up with the powder and the cocaine took the place of the heroin.
Well, all of those things. Well, see, this is where I'm at. Because, see, you go on a little bit farther than living in that kind of a neighborhood. I lived in that kind of neighborhood during that era. And during that era, that neighborhood was just like every other neighborhood that other people who, when they wanted to go find a good time, they would find a good neighborhood. And there were people who were just the people to see or the people to do. There was the pool hall. You know, there was a rooming house. You know, there was, you know, little design shop. There was this in every little area. And ever say what?
Remember Sesame Street, the little song where they were talking about all the different people?
Yeah, these are people in your neighborhood. And understand that out of all of these are the people in the neighborhood, 7 out of 9 of them were Judases. By the standards that people are trying to look at these characters in this movie today. And therein lies where I'm at in this whole thing. Because you can't tell them how beautiful black was enough where, you know, that, you know, it wasn't like these newfound movies where you got a Judas that walks away like this. No, that Judas killed himself, died, cried as he left. He left, but he cried as he left. You know, I'm not understanding we're in a whole different state enough for you to apply so much hate to how so many people are trying to see these things. And I think that's what's most important in this particular broadcast, because, you know, it's more difficult for someone that's genetically different enough that I'm cool enough to hang out with people younger than my children, but I'm too old to explain to them in a manner that they can understand, because I have no words great enough to I would have to digitally paint a picture that would have to be so euphoric that you'd have to do acid to really appreciate the artistic ability of her, to dig you some shrooms. No, that's not going to work. But the thing here,
look at the difference. Look at the difference when we went from album art to CD covers to nothing now. We used to go for the albums that had a double album because we used that to clean the seeds out of our own. But we also had that artwork that could be in the Museum of Modern Art now on all the Parliament albums. All those photos that was on the Ohio Players albums. You know what I'm saying? All
yeah.
Those albums that you had, groups that you loved.
Well, check this out. Well, check this out. But check this out. See, back in that era, another thing that most people didn't notice, back in that era, there were very few record players or tape players or things of that nature, and yet all of the best music that they needed to live on a day-to-day basis always existed in every scene of those eras back then, which means it was available, but it was available in the airwaves. It was available as if it was available where it was available where it wasn't just because they liked it. It was because they lived it. You know, these songs would come on at just the right time. And, you know, people would do parties and slow drag parties right at the, you know, the Quiet Storm hour of the slow jam movie, or this, that, and the other, you know. And, well, not necessarily even rent parties. I'm talking about transistor radio, bro. Transistor radio, where you just found the right station that had the right thing at the right time, and that's it. And yet, in us talking about the history of this, we're excluding a lot of the other things that existed in there. You're looking at the scene with the shootout scene, you know, and then watching when the dude goes in and blows up the place. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, you know, the difference between that and what happened in Philly is that when they went in that time, they blew up the block or two. And imagine watching that same scene, only not just seeing that store go up, but you see a block or two go up. Knowing people in there the whole nine, they just said, you know, later for them, and boom, and you sitting there and you watching and you're sitting there, and for the rest of your life from that point, you always remember that moment where, you know, all them people just gone. All them people just gone. And imagining those people today in their 60s and 70s, not being able to explain to the people who live on those blocks now how it felt to be there that day when all of those people who possessed that place long before those people found it again, just gone.
Look at the congruity of what you just said.
Hmm.
Talk about people right now explaining things.
Oh.
People right now that are in their 60s and 70s explaining things
and
about what happened.
And here's the funny thing, you know, because see, you know, I'm sitting back there and the guy just spouting out names. He's like, yeah, Dick Gregory. I was like, yeah, I know Dick Gregory. When we were a kid, we had this black bookstore at Community Center up north from Pittsburgh, and we was kind of people in the know, in the loop. And so a lot of these people, this, that, and the other, they remember me as a little kid because they had to, because they slept in my damn bed and I had to sleep on that damn couch. And I remember these people. I didn't know who these people were, but when I say who I was and who my parents were and where we were at that time and that era, in order for them to get from A to Z, sometimes they had to come through. And I remember how, you know, the people on the blocks and the communities, had a certain kind of uh, vibe about how they kept everything in their communities evolving. Rather, the good and the bad had to somewhere or another equal itself out in a certain kind of manner that they couldn't never explain to you. And now we're in a world where those things don't make sense. You got to say no to this, or you can't do this, or this is not this, that, and the other, or this, that, and the other. And it's hard to explain, when in many cases, it's more difficult to understand. We got here by many Judases playing the game better than they knew they were playing. And for a lot of other people that are out there that thought that this land was their land and they thought that they were going to be able to get out of this whole thing. I feel sorry for a lot of them because we're all they got. And the we're all we got is more of these kids that can't understand how beautiful black has always been, because crack really did a number on the ability for anyone to explain to them that when they were raised in, nope, understand what I'm saying? Genetically, you can use the same words and they just have a instinctual difference when you use them. You trigger different things in them. And I started this whole thing off by using, once again, the analogy of Uncle Tom. Any person in any kind of forum that starts anything off with an Uncle Tom is automatically discluded from all logic at all, due to the mere fact that both the character and the autobiography paints the picture of what any white person would have conditioned every black person to believe was not a good thing for you to be. And we're all Uncle Toms today, if you're lucky. Because Uncle Tom looked for his people, freed the doggone people, got them all the way to county, and married the damn the master's wife. Come on, man, he was gangster. And you can't understand that and use that against anybody who would think that, because you can't understand the difference between a good person and a Sambo. Now, Sambo wasn't supposed to be a bad word, but if you don't read the book, nobody has ever, because most of these people reading in that long of a time frame, is just too much for them. Their brains are on such a different thing. Yeah, where they ain't got a video on YouTube about them, a cartoon or something. When the people who invented one of the cartoons, Dante, did it in a series so eloquently that I was like, man, this is some stuff that the reason why I stayed out so long wasn't because the kids liked this movie. It's because adults was like, wow, it's like theater. They did the whole Dante's Inferno thing. All the characters are there. Look at that. Oh, that's interesting how they did that. This, that, and the other. And the little kids going, huh? And yet you're going, wow. Right. But at the same time, but understand something, though. I'm talking about something to that degree. And now we go back to Judas, and a Black Messiah, and they didn't say that because it was Fred Hamilton. They said that because it was the Black Messiah of everywhere. And for everywhere that there was a Black Messiah, there were Judases, and they coexisted in a manner where some of them were not so bad enough that some of the messiahs just floated all off into the sunset. Some of them, was gone.
You know where that came from? That whole title? It came from Hoover saying that they will not have another Black Messiah unless we give it to them.
Then there you go. And now
that's where that came
from. And now this is the part that most people in these movies don't understand. Was fueling this, and this was in the small little tidbits that they gave you of the cultural decency level of the authorities, all the way up to J. Edgar Hoover. And if J. Edgar Hoover was, A lot of people didn't understand that, J. Edgar Hoover, had J. Edgar Hoover been an out person, he would basically be flying on the LBGTQIA flag right now with pride. But there was no pride in LBGT. But a lot of these people and those organizations to that degree required you to be almost in the state of that in order for you to be the people who were going out and recruiting Judases for, their own. And you got to understand just how deep this was, because in a lot of ways, I'm not saying that LBGTQs created Judases, but but J. Edgar Hoover and a lot of those people, in order for them to be in the mindset that they were enough to be able to control some of the things that happen in our communities, did so, due to the level of reality that they existed in themselves, in a way of sitting back and going, he probably did a good thing. He only, he left a virgin, or this, that, and the other, or poor little so-and-so. And you not understand how real, all those things seem to have been enough that regardless of how bad or how good, but how bad or how good has got us here, the people, all of the people right now that are viewing this, have viewed the movie or have heard or talked about the whole aspect of this. They're the people who, basically speaking, had this thing not existed in whatever way it looked like it existed to us now, none of us would be here today. And it's not that it's put us in the worst condition, but if there was ever a day, but to sit there and realize, for any person of Magna, this direction, if you are not raising your flag to half staff over, one of your people, having passed today or whatnot, then you've got no say in all of this, because, this whole subject.
I gotta tell you something. I gotta say something about your topic.
Go ahead.
Because your topic got to do with the crack era, right?
Exactly.
The crack era coincided with an entirely different paradigm for music and entertainment.
Yeah.
In the 1980s, with the song "Video Killed the Radio Star,"
and all of that.
TV took audio. It took music from being an audio experience to being a visual experience.
Exactly. And I mean,
from that point forward,
man,
visually acuitive more than they have been audio.
Yeah, I mean,
in Vietnam, they were playing Motown.
Right, but they was doing it on a one speaker. But listen what I'm saying. But they were doing it on a one speaker transistor radio. You understand what I'm saying? And now we got earbuds and yeah. Well, and that's what doesn't exist. Well, you have to understand that's how this discomfort, this conflict, we're trying to express to these generations after the crack era, not because they want to be, connected to, or associated with, but because it was such a genetically instinctual shift in our ability to believe whatever we think we will believe, that when 9/11 happened,
they got it off because it was visual. Like I said,
it was on our money, and it's been on our money the whole time, and it's taken us as an enlightened society to make it that far, and yet we still got people that can't handle the images of the existences of things that pertain to what we call our history, our legacy, in a manner enough to be able to not just fight for the Hamiltons, but for the Judases too. For Hampton, right? Oh, my bad. You understand what I'm saying? because it wasn't just the Messiah types. It was everybody else that was happy that they were fighting for them. Everybody else that was glad that we had a good one in our community. You understand what I'm saying? And people would hear about the good things that they were doing in their community, and they would travel from their community all the way around the country to oh man, that's nice. And yeah, we got this, that, and the other. And you not understanding that it wasn't the fact that we lost it because we lost it. We were picked off like flies, and just a manner of the fact that it was too soon for us to be who we are today. And how we know that today.
Look at the fact that by the time they got to Chicago,
yeah,
this all started in Oakland, California.
But
by
yes,
the time they got to Chicago, they were branching.
But Chicago was already on a whole different thing, too. You understand what I'm saying? Because Chicago ended up being the corrupter after the fact. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So from Nova Drew Ali, they went to Gang to Disciples and
right. And so and a lot right. And so in a lot of cases, all these things, the reconstruction is the era that people need to understand is where all of this went wrong, because people started believing that birth of a nation image. Same thing that happened to them out here at the Capitol. Same damn thing. These doggone light-skinned mentality people, see what I'm saying, are that kind of, and that visual. And no matter how you want to say you're a spiritual person, if you can't understand every word that's been put out here, then I can't really speak for you. All I can do is say that, this movie, is now being discussed in forums that most people would not, hey, well, why don't y'all go talk about that somewhere else? No, that's why they got Black Twitter. And oh my God, and the thing is, it would be a lot better if there was a requirement that everybody who actually has an idea about anything on any kind of place, they should have to be required to go live somewhere where everybody else that they're talking to comes from. So they really get it. They get it when somebody say they grits or they beans don't smell the same way that they smell over here, then they get it because they're over there, and therein lies the other problem we got right now. Everybody thinks that we're all still the same. We're so unique in every person who's got a profile that, we can't find a better mutual thing to focus on because everybody's still being triggered by their own little interpretation of what somebody created for them when they told them that Uncle Tom was a negative thing. And I can guarantee you, most of the Black people who still have that kind of instinct was told by another Black person.
And just to illustrate that, the whole subject of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Everybody that I've spoken to believes that to be true, but not one of those people that I've spoken to,
even after they read it, even after they go, this what gets me. Oh my God, man! Even after they
never owned a horse,
oh,
that might make sense to you.
oh,
If you own a horse, you know to put salt in his oats and you can make him drink.
oh,
It's the exact same thing.
yeah, it's like everybody likes, everybody likes quiche, but ain't too many of them raise no chickens. They ain't had different kind of eggs. They don't know a whole lot of other things. They ain't that deep about it. But this is where we're at in life now. We're at that level now. Now we're at a level where you can't say civil rights. You got to get into the truffles of this cuisine, not just the meat, the potatoes. We got to get the truffles of this. And the truffles of this is the mere fact that that Judas instinct has hurt us more than our ability to wonder how the brother, no, check this out, but wonder how the brother who this movie was actually about, who ended up after giving these people the whole story and nothing but the story, so help him, died not too long after by his own hand. even after he was out and hooked up, died. Just over the fear, just over the fear of the wondering. Listen what I'm saying. It was killing him. It was killing his spirit just as the thought. I would not want nobody to know about what I did back then. And there's a whole freaking movie about him right now. And he's dead.
Imagine what it would have been.
Imagine what it would have been like if he was. It would have been like finding Sly Stone under the bridge. You know what I'm saying?
In the 70s.
Oh.
Not in the 2010s.
You know?
Like finding Sly Stone under a bridge in the 70s.
You know, and the deep thing about that is, had he not died, then he would have died soon, because a lot of those people. No, understand, because see, a lot of the people who fought, you know, when all of a sudden that fight stopped, and there were so many other things like, you know, you can't live with your baby mama now, not because it's against the welfare, but because she's doing so good, she don't need you back up in here. You know, you still got a record from back in the militant days, you know, and are you still on that stuff? And understanding that right as all of that happened, then that was at the same time that people were starting to party and bullshit and party and bullshit. And all of a sudden, the last poets had that thing, the mean machine, you know, and you're like, bam, automatic push button, remote control, genetic, phonetic, all of that computer shit changed everything. People were born on a digital realm instead of an analog realm, and nobody could understand the smell of funk when you tell them how funky it was back in the 60s and the 70s. You know, and they understand. They be like, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, funk, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm into that funk too, yeah. No, bruh, you ain't running to that kind of funk. That kind of funk knock you off your feet funk, because that's how funky it is. And they would tell you it's that knock you off the feet, and you can't understand that because you can't find your mind enough to relate to an instinct that would cause you to be able to have that kind of instinct to fall, you know, and go, man, that's got to be some good shit, because it got you falling off your feet. It's so funky. Yeah, now you get it. Oh, I'm hip. You know, and we're realizing that LOL is not good enough anymore. And yet we want to talk on these little, you know, mainframes. You know, we want to, you know, hook up on the chats and, you know, and the Twitters and this, that, and the other, and voice our opinion about the way we feel about how the movie was portrayed, about a time that you have no idea about enough to see it in more of a positive mode than picking who's the enemy, who's the bad one, who's this, and other. I don't like that person. I this, that, and the other. We have to grow out of that. And that's the reason that we've got a whole Black History Month. And many of our black butts are stuck not being able to move as much as we like to due to all of this other stuff, just like a lot of other people. And we've got these things. And for that reason, I'm going to ask that, you know, if you've stuck along in any kind of portion with this, please donate to my Cash App, you know, and the whole nine. And this has been WNDC. NDC. WNDC stands for We in the Crib, and you ain't. And I'm hoping that some of this finds some of you well. You good?